I know a guy who's small and mean, and his head is filled with pumpkin seeds. He'll let you live if you desire. Just don't blow out that pumpkin's fire. Check your candy. Check your candy. Trick or treat. Trick or Treat is a horror comedy anthology film that was sadly produced in 2007, but shelved for 2 years until it was finally released. It was written and directed by Michael Dougherty and produced by everyone's favorite person, Bryan Singer. The film boasts an excellent ensemble cast of the great Dylan Baker, Anna Paquin, Leslie Bibb, and Brian Cox. But this is not your daddy's anthology film, oh no. Instead of separating the segments or even telling them in chronological order, they decided to take a pulp fiction style approach where it's more of a non-linear style storytelling. It cleverly interweaves 4 stories together, so characters that may have died in the first part are seen in later segments in the background as Easter eggs. It's a very fun way to watch the film, especially if you watch it more than once. It ties together these 4 Halloween night stories with one common thread: Sam. Sam is a trick-or-treater who wears little orange footy pajamas and a little burlap sack mask, and he's adorable. Sam makes an appearance in all 4 of these segments whenever someone breaks a Halloween tradition. Sam actually originated from the filmmaker Michael Dougherty's short film that he made. That's his thesis film in college. It's a 3-minute long animated short called Season's Greetings, and it's basically just Sam going from house to house trick-or-treating, and that's where the story for this film was developed from. I'm going to do my best not to spoil major things in the movie, and it's kind of hard with this one since they interweave, like I said, so I'm just going to try to give you the gist of each story. The film's opening has Halloween-hating Emma and Halloween-loving husband Henry come home after a night of partying and Halloween. So this opening is technically the last thing that takes place in the evening. So that's the kind of movie this is. She despises Halloween. He goes upstairs to start a sexy video for the two of them. And while he's up there, she immediately starts tearing down all the decorations and blows out the fire from the jack-o'-lantern before midnight, which apparently is a no-no, I guess. But she learns her lesson and is brutally murdered, and it's pretty cool. It's sort of a cold open, this movie, which I like. It's different than other movies. It doesn't have its own story. It's just a little snippet, like here's what you're in for. And then it cuts into an amazing score / animated opening credit sequence, which is very comic book inspired, a la Creepshow, I guess, which I never even thought of that until I watched both of them back to back, so, recently. The animated intro sort of does some exposition and explaining, like, oh, by the way, there's 4 separate stories. This is what it's about, because apparently it's too confusing for audiences and old people who hated it when they did test screenings. The first official story in the anthology is called Principal. It's about a chubby kid who is going around destroying jack-o'-lanterns, played by Thurman Merman of Bad Santa. I can't remember his real name, because he's always Thurman Merman to me. He comes across the principal's house, played by the great character actor Dylan Baker, who's always the best at being super charming yet insanely creepy at the same time in almost everything I've ever seen him in. So Principal Stephen Wilkins, that is his name. I'm really good at remembering names. He talks with the boy here, teaches him a lesson about Halloween, about how it's about honoring old traditions, things of that nature, which is the entire theme of the film. All these are based on different Halloween legends and myths and lore. So it's kind of cool. It's different. It's an actual Halloween film. He offers him a candy bar while he's explaining all this stuff. Charlie becomes more and more ill as time passes and begins vomiting out a hilarious amount of chocolate and blood to the point where he collapses. Because apparently the principal laced the candy with cyanide, therefore teaching him the lesson to always check your candy. While doing a god-awful job of trying to cover up this murder, more trick-or-treaters come who know him from school because they're children, and he's the principal. It makes sense. And then behind the regular kids is Sam. We get our first glimpse of Sam, who takes a candy bar out of the thing and just walks away like any other great trick-or-treater would. And the candy bar is awesome because it comes back later in the film. And it's good setup. Good setups and payoffs in this one. I don't want to go too much deeper into this one. It's like, yeah, the principal's obviously evil and he's killing children, and then we'll see where it goes from there. But I will say that later in the sequence, it does cross over with what is the final sequence of the film about his grumpy old neighbor, played by Brian Cox. We'll get more into him later. And this plays very well into the Pulp Fiction style that I was referring to earlier. The second sequence in the film is the Halloween school bus massacre. This one opens up on a group of teenage assholes, because they always are, taking jack-o'-lanterns. They're asking nicely, but they're trying to get as many jack-o'-lanterns as they can together. They go along and they run into a very sweet little girl named Rhonda, who is a stern Halloween traditionalist. She shows signs of autism, things of that sort. So you can kind of see where this is going. These popular kids are going to try to take advantage of poor little Rhonda here. This is where it's going. So they go down to the old quarry where the Halloween school bus massacre took place years ago. And it goes into this sepia tone flashback about a bus driver who was paid by the parents of the disabled children of the school to kill them, which is horrible. And they're all shackled together on the bus, and his plan was to, just take them out and kill them. But one of the kids escapes from his shackles, takes control of the bus, and then drives it off the cliff into the quarry, killing the children anyways. And the jerk-off kids do what jerk-off kids do, and they take advantage of Rhonda, like I said, scaring the shit out of her, pretending to be these children rising from the dead. But I'll just say this prank ends up backfiring on them in way more ways than one. I remember the first time I watched this segment seemed kind of slow-paced for some reason. Even though the movie's like 82 minutes long or some ridiculously short runtime, it's fantastic. Went by in a flash this time when I watched it. But yeah, for some reason this one always seemed to drag. But not this time. I got really into the story this time. I watched it with the commentary as well. And it's just a little more enlightening. You get to learn little behind-the-scenes things as you're watching the story. And it makes it that much more interesting. I've got to give props to some pretty good cinematography in this segment as well. There's Rhonda's house, which is just littered with candlelit jack-o'-lanterns, and it's just an amazing sight to see. And then, like I said, the flashback scenes of the children on the bus are filmed in this like old-fashioned sepia tone, and it just looks beautiful. It's exactly what you would imagine it would look like in a film like this. They do a fantastic job of setting up the mood in this one. The third segment is Surprise Party. This one stars Laurie, who is named after Laurie Strode, played by Anna Paquin. She is hanging out with her buddies, her, hot teenage girlfriend ladies, and they're all wearing skimpy princess outfits, and she's stuck being dressed as Little Red Riding Hood, and her older sister, who she is with, is trying to drag her to, do this more fun party-esque thing tonight, but she just wants to do the old-fashioned trick-or-treating with her sister because she misses that sort of thing. She's a traditionalist. That's a running thing in this movie, if you haven't got that yet. Her friends and sister are all trying to pick up dates for this party they're doing later. Laurie declines. She'd rather just go watch the Halloween festival. At that point, we sort of transition into this alleyway where a man dressed like a vampire, cloaked and masked, and all you see is his mouth and eyes, basically, is sort of making out with some young lady in the alley until he bites her neck and slowly kills her. So yeah, apparently this is a vampire movie. We go from there. We eventually get to this party in the middle of the woods. Anna Paquin is attacked by this same man, but she manages to overcome him and knock him out, and she physically drags him along with her to this party in the woods. Once we unmask this vampire person, it ends up being Stephen Wilkins, the principal from the beginning of the film. He's not a vampire. He's just dressed as one so he can murder people. Apparently, he's a serial killer. So that's cool. He gets his comeuppance because the second half of this sequence is arguably the greatest thing in the movie, and I don't want to spoil the surprise if anyone hasn't seen it, but it's fucking awesome. I'll just say that. It has some of the coolest makeup effects in modern horror, honestly. I haven't seen anything I prefer over it that I can think of off the top of my head recently. And this whole movie has amazing practical effects. They did as much as they possibly could, the old-fashioned way, and I think that's why this movie has stuck around as well as it has. The fourth and final segment is Sam. This is the one that stars Brian Cox, playing the neighbor to Stephen Wilkins named Krieg. He suggested that he'd be made up with wig and prosthetics to resemble John Carpenter. I love that it was Brian Cox's idea and not the filmmakers to look like John Carpenter, because it just makes it a million times cooler, because Brian Cox is awesome. Krieg is a jerk. He scares the little kid trick-or-treaters off his porch using his dog dressed up like a monster and other various ways. Things start to get weird for him very quickly. He starts getting his house egged. His lawn is like magically filled with jack-o'-lanterns all of a sudden. And most frightening, his hallway and ceiling and everything is graffitied out in Sam Hain style writing and lettering. Eventually we find out that the person doing this is Sam, because he's breaking Halloween traditions, and Sam don't play that. If anyone breaks the rules of Halloween, they have to answer to Sam. Sam is sort of the personification of Halloween superstition, and that's cool. It's a creative idea. It's something that hasn't been seen. He's like an actual Halloween mascot that isn't just a killer from a horror movie. He's a mascot that represents what Halloween means, and that is very unique and original. Well, a bunch of more happens. I'm not going to say every little thing, but eventually Krieg inadvertently offers Sam a treat, and he spares his life because he followed the rule of Halloween and learned his lesson. I'll just say that Sam is not the last trick-or-treater that Krieg gets that evening. Like in all the previous segments, the practical effects on Sam are fantastic, and I think it's basically official at this point that Sam is the newest official horror icon. He's all over the shirts and the toys. I got a lamp over there of Sam. I got a doll that dances around because my kid loves it. My kid is being Sam for Halloween. He is now part of pop culture, and that's awesome because he's a little adorable Sam and everyone loves him. He's so cute. Mask on or off. I found that the film's non-linear storytelling style made the pacing of the film way faster than it would have been had they chunked it apart into segments. The interweaving Easter eggs and storylines from various other films and segments that haven't even happened yet make it fun for rewatching. Like you'll see, like I said before, you'll see a character who's dead in the background of the third segment because this one actually happened first and the opening is technically the end. You know, that kind of thing. It makes it more fun to watch, and it makes it more interesting to rewatch, which is even more important. Like I said in the opening, the film was produced in 2007, but due to a combination of having no idea how to market an anthology film at that point in time in Hollywood, and the fact that all anyone wanted was torture porn and remakes of much better movies, they shelved it for 2 years, and it trickled into some film festivals and got great buzz and word of mouth, and then eventually just kind of plopped on Blu-ray and DVD in 2009. So it's essentially a direct-to-video movie that became a cult classic. The way this film was released was sort of a blessing in disguise, according to the filmmaker, because it was able to get this high praise and become this kind of like secret thing that you had to seek out. So if it didn't have this sort of awkward release, it probably wouldn't have become as big as it has. It would have just been some horror movie that came out and everyone thought it was all right and it would have been forgotten about. But because of the sort of aura around it, it became a bigger thing than it probably would have had it just had a regular theatrical release. Despite many talks, there has not been a sequel. They've been talking about it for years. I could care less either way. I mean, if it's a horror anthology that involves Sam and all the stories have nothing to do with these stories, cool. I'll watch another horror anthology. It'd be fun. But we don't need a sequel to everything. I'll just say that. I do like that Michael Dougherty sort of did a spiritual sequel, I would say, with Krampus, where he does the similar kind of horror comedy that takes on Christmas legend and folklore as opposed to Halloween, except for it's one narrative story as opposed to a anthology. And the best compliment I can give this movie is that it's one of the rare horror movies that people watch on Halloween that's actually about Halloween. Way more than any of the Halloween films that just happen to take place on Halloween, but it could be any other movie. All you got to do is swap out a day. There's Black Christmas. It's a Christmas movie. Halloween's a Halloween movie. You could set a movie on any day and call it that kind of movie. But this is a movie that's actually about the holiday and what makes that holiday special. And that is why Trick or Treat is awesome, and having rewatched all of these might be my new favorite anthology film. I'll have to, it's up there. I don't want to say it too soon, but it's definitely up there. So thank you for watching yet another hashtag Anthology Horror August video. There is more to come. Halloween 3 will be next. Yes, I know it's not an anthology movie, but if you know why I'm doing it, you know why I'm doing it this month. So I'll just keep it at that. We'll get there when we get there. Please like, share, and subscribe. All that hubbub on the YouTube. Follow me on Instagram, Convicted Cinephile. TikTok, Convicted Cinephile. I'm not on there very often, but I'm gonna do it just because it's what all the hip kids are doing. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time.
Talk, shop, pop, movies.